The inhumanity of the American media is constantly on display, whether it comes to the economic disaster that Biden has imposed on us and the Democrats, whether it comes to the brainwashing of little kids in our public schools and elsewhere, sexualizing them, whether it comes to critical race theory, a radical racist ideology that is imposed on our society, on our military. The media never apologize for what they do or how they do it. In fact, they exploit it. As an example is Joy Reid. There is no way Joy Reid should be on any broadcast platform. She's homophobic, in my view, given her past tweets. She is clearly racist. And yet there she is, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. What did she have to say? Go.
When New Yorkers of a certain age talk about the bad old days, they're often talking about the 1970s and 80s, a very different era for the now glittering and largely gentrified metropolis of today. The city was besieged by poverty and teetering on bankruptcy. Times Square, which today looks like a digital Disneyland, was the epicenter of the sex industry. While in the late 1970s, serial killer David Berkowitz, known as the Son of Sam, terrorized the city, killing 6 people and injuring at least 7 others along the way. The subways were different and looked different, too, tagged with graffiti filled with character, yes, but also with grime and a heavy police presence. There was a grit, but also a sense of danger. Crack cocaine and heroin infested the city, driving the crime rate even higher, with much of that crime occurring on the subways, as noted in this clip from NBC Nightly News in 1985.
The New York subway system, the Bernard Goetz case, the subway shooter, has given the subways fresh notoriety. To many outsiders, even to many who live here, this is an area where fear prevails.
In case you missed it, Tom Brokaw referred to the subway shooter known as Bernard Goetz. He was also known as the subway vigilante after shooting and injuring 4 young black men on a train in Manhattan after Goetz said they were trying to rob him. This was a huge case that garnered international attention.
No. After Goetz said they were trying to rob him, well, they had sharpened screwdrivers and other weapons, and they literally threatened him. So he shot them. Go.
One of those teens was permanently paralyzed, but Goetz was still acquitted of 4 attempted murder charges and convicted only of carrying an unlicensed handgun. He served 8 months in prison, 8 months.
Because it was considered self-defense. God, she's awful. Just such a hateful propagandist. Go ahead.
New York eventually climbed out of that difficult era for many reasons, from falling unemployment in the 1990s to shifting patterns of drug use, and also gun control. New York State and New York City today have some of the strictest rules for gun ownership in the country. And fast forward to literally today, when panic on the New York City subway brought back those bad old memories.
Now, hold on. How did she miss Rudy Giuliani? Isn't that amazing, guys? How did she miss Rudy Giuliani and tough on crime and special police units who would preempt criminal conduct, who went out on the street actually looking for potential criminals and so forth before they would act? How come she didn't mention him, the squeegee guys and all the rest being picked up and arrested, where he didn't tolerate any criminal activity? He wanted to clear the streets. He wanted to bring back a bustling New York. She skips over all that. Now, that occurred in the 80s and 90s and really into 2000. Other mayors, for instance, Bloomberg, picked up where the Giuliani and others left off. Go ahead.
We've got a Glock brand, so it's not a ghost gun. It's going to have a serial number. It's going to be traced. We heard at the press conference that they don't believe it was stolen, even better. So there's going to be some track record here of where it came from, who purchased it. Fairly easily traced, we hope. The 30-some-odd shell casings found on the scene, all, again, going to be tied to...
Now, let's wait a moment. I don't know what she's going to say. The gun was purchased at a pawn shop in North Carolina in 2011. They were able to track it because of the federal system. That's why the feds are there, in part from the Treasury Department. Anybody who purchases a gun at a gun show or from a gun shop or so forth, even a pawn shop, You have to fill out paperwork that goes into a federal data system. They keep talking about universal background checks. We have almost universal background checks. What's not covered? If you have an antique rifle, you know, maybe from the 1750s, a front loader, you give that as a gift or you sell it. You give a gift to a relative, something like that. They're not expected to fill out federal paperwork, and almost none of the killings that take place in this country are as a result of, quote unquote, those loopholes. The guns are typically stolen. The guns are typically gotten on the black market where nobody's going to show up and say, look, I got a gun. Do I need to fill out federal paperwork? And they have their serial numbers shaved off. Let's see what she's saying. Go ahead.
Prosecution once they find this suspect, but I think there's a larger issue going on here, which is we've got New York State, and I can tell you, I'll bet you dollars to donuts, if we flipped over to another certain network, Joy, they're going to be saying right now, see that? See, New York has these really strict gun laws, and see, it happened there, so gun laws are stupid. And so I'm here to tell you that no, actually, if you look
I
at
watch that other network a lot. Matter of fact, I'm on there from time to time. It's called Fox, and I didn't hear anybody say gun laws are stupid. It depends what gun laws you have in mind. Are all gun laws smart? Of course not. So this is the best they can do on MSNBC in the middle of a horrific event like this. Go ahead.
data, states in this country that have those stricter gun laws tend to have less gun crime. It's actually, that's the way it works. The problem...
That is a lie. I wish I had John Lott with me right now. He would explain to you how one has nothing to do with the other. They have strict gun laws in Chicago and the highest rate of murder in Chicago. They have strict gun laws in every city in the country and the highest rate of murder in these cities. So you know that's not true. You know it can't possibly be true. The statistics aren't true. But a jerk like this throws that out. He knows Joy Reid won't say, what is your basis for that? What statistics are you talking about? Meanwhile, this is in New York and it still occurred. And I would make that point. It's in New York and it still occurred. Go ahead.
The problem is when guns enter from somewhere else.
But guns always enter from somewhere else, just like people do, just like food does, just like the air does. We don't live in bubbles. I try to, but we don't live in bubbles. So a lot of these guns come from over the border, but it's like water. If there's a will, there's a way. These gang groups and so forth, all the laws that they tend to propose would affect people who are already law-abiding citizens, making it harder and harder for law-abiding citizens to have weapons. And that's the truth. Most of these other, I mean, how would you have stopped this guy? If he couldn't get a gun, don't you think they would have used something else? He used gas canisters. He had gasoline with him. He had a hatchet with him. He had fuses with him. So in other words, he was ready to blow up in a crude form, in a crude way, the subway system, to set it on fire. I mean, we've had people blow up federal buildings, kill almost 200 people, slaughter them with fertilizer in a truck. So you have huge number of deaths that occur in this country with knives. It's a slippery slope. I simply don't trust the federal government, specifically after this pandemic, with this kind of power. I do not. There's a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights exists for a reason. You start chipping away at them in a significant way, you lose them. Whether it's due process, whether it's free speech, whether it's a really free press, freedom of association, whether it's equal protection, whether it's the taking clause, where the government's not allowed to take your property without reimbursing you, and on and on and on and on, it becomes a slippery slope. And then the judges throw in. And then you've got nothing.
Want to see more? Sign up for Levin TV.